In this episode of the Exploring Information Security Podcast, bad advice cybersecurity professionals provide to the public.
Computers now have primary control of critical functions.
Houston, recommend vector transfer.
Your go for APU shutdown on time.
Roger, go for deploy.
Nice to be in orbit.
Welcome to the Exploring Information Security Podcast, where you will learn, explore, and grow your security mindset. I'm your host, Timothy D. Block, and in this episode, we'll be exploring the bad advice cybersecurity professionals give everyday people. With me to do that is Bob Lord, a seasoned cybersecurity expert and the driving force behind the Hacklore initiative, an expert-backed project dedicated to debunking obsolete, fear-based cybersecurity myths. He formerly worked at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, where he developed foundational cyber guidance for small businesses. Bob believes in secure by design practices, which feeds into a lot of this conversation around the bad advice we give. Show notes can be found at exploresec.com/EIS. Feedback for the show, timothy.dblock@exploresec.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn. You can rate the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. That also helps spread the ExploreSec ambiance. I don't know, ambiance is probably not the right word, but we're going with it. You can join the community for ExploreSec. We have a Discord and a listserv. You can find those at exploresec.com/community. So this was a good conversation with Bob. As you'll hear, I kind of had some of the similar ideas around it. Starting last year, I thought about doing my own initiative. Saw this came out. I also did not have the time I thought I could to devote to the thing I was planning to do, but I love this initiative because I do, working in the cybersecurity space, feel like some of the advice we give, it gets outdated. Sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it's not. And we give a lot of it because, let's be honest, we're all worried about something bad happening. But a majority of the time it doesn't happen. This could be, considered the same thing around a lot of conversations around the business still needs to function and needs to do its job. So there is some inherent risk involved. In fact, we talked a little bit about phishing after I stopped recording, and Bob made a great point about the fact that the internet is meant to click on links. So telling people not to click on links is just really bad advice. We don't get into that specifically here, but that was something afterwards we kind of talked about. And, to me, it's better to report, but we really need to refine what we're giving people advice on. So this was a really great conversation to dive into with Bob about that. And I'm looking forward to see, this initiative kind of progress over the next several years. So with that, let's go ahead and get right into it. How are you this morning?
Doing A-okay. It's a little overcast here in San Francisco, but it kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah, is it kind of like that? Everyone talks about raining in Seattle, but it's more like a constant mist than anything.
Yeah, I mean, this is just one of these times. I'm just looking at the weather here. It looks like for the next 10 days, mostly showers. Nothing super hard, but
Yeah. Are you going down? Do you go to RSA then every year, or because they're in?
Yeah. So I sometimes speak. I'll be speaking this year. Sometimes I just meet up with friends who are in town. I don't necessarily go.
What are you speaking on this year?
So I'll be talking about cybersecurity near misses. So the idea is all of these other sectors like the aviation industry, they learn from things that almost went wrong. And we should probably think a lot more about that in our world.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like, I'm a big believer in threat modeling. And it feels like some of that, but it's funny. It's super easy to do. It's low cost, but no one wants to do it or carve out time for it. But it's like immensely helpful in everything I've ever done it for, and I've done it for a lot of projects, and it's really helped things run a lot smoother.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Yeah. So with the Hacklore stuff, like, where did that start for you?
Well, I think that has been something on my mind for maybe a decade or so, in various forms. And I'll tell you where the real trigger was. The thing that really pushed me over the edge. The thing is, there are a lot of friends I have who are CISOs in organizations and other security professionals, and they know that it triggers me when I hear about things like advice to not use cafe Wi-Fi because the evil barista is going to get you. So they, on a regular basis, will send me news articles just to sort of get a rise out of me. And there was one Sunday where one of my CISO friends sent me the trifecta. So it had advice to avoid public Wi-Fi. It said, watch out for juice jacking in the airports. And it said, my God, you're going to lose all of your money if you scan a QR code in the restaurant. And I just said, I have to do something more constructive than roll my eyes at this particular state of affairs. So I said, would anybody co-sign a letter if I stuck up a website? And a whole bunch of people said, yeah, they would do that. So I stuck up the website, and then people just kept saying, oh, you need to add me to the list. And so I think we have about 100 people who have joined at that point. So that was really the trigger was that sassy email I got from a friend who's a CISO.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that, because right around the same time, I'm the same way. I work in security awareness, so I have to talk with people. I work with people. I've probably really where I started learning that like maybe we overdo it in cybersecurity is working with developers, and we were talking about threat modeling, really questioned me. I'm like, what does this actually mean? Like, okay, yes, this is a vulnerability, but what's the likelihood? And so I really had to defend myself. And because I was embedded with the development team, I wasn't working with security people. And that kind of really opened my eyes to the fact that we provide a lot of different advice. And it's like, and I actually was thinking about this year, I didn't end up doing it just due to time, but one piece of it, security advice every day for the year, because I guarantee you I could find 365 days of advice. And it's like, how is anybody outside of our industry really supposed to do anything with that? So I'm glad that you started that up, because it's exactly thinking along the same lines. Like, what is this? I think we really need to rethink, like, what is the most important stuff we need to tell people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm old enough that I remember a time when spreadsheets, you had to hit, I forgot what it was, like Shift F9 to recalculate, because recalculating a big spreadsheet was computationally expensive enough that you didn't want to do it every time you changed a cell. We kind of have to learn how to do that on a regular basis. We have to go back and say, is the current threat landscape and the current technology landscape, are they the same as they were last time we made up our minds about what advice to give and how to live our lives? The answer is often no. Things have changed, maybe a little, maybe a lot. But if you can go back, not every day, of course, but occasionally go back and say, is this still true? Or you can ask questions like, hey, what crimes am I preventing? And as soon as you start tying it back to actual crimes, it becomes a little bit easier to separate the advice that is for the spy thrillers and for the human rights activists and the government officials working overseas. Like, yeah, they need different advice. But for the everyday person, what crimes are we trying to stop? And are those the most common crimes? And what I noticed, and many other people, and it sounds like you have too, is there are many crimes happening on a regular basis, but so much of our advice seems disconnected from helping those people. And the basics are still the basics. You should use MFA. You should have a password manager. You should update your software. So we keep forgetting to kind of come back to those basics, and we get distracted with this new stuff, the stuff that sounds very important, but is truly disconnected from the most common crimes that people run into, like literally every second of every day.
Yeah. I think that I keep going back to threat modeling, but it's like you mentioned it, right? A spy might need to be concerned about juice jacking, but that's because they're getting targeted by other spies, right? So there is that level. But
state is after you. You have a different set of problems, and there's different advice. There's different advice for you, but for the average person, just doing their thing, the evil barista is not going to get you.
No. Well, even it's still the advice of like updating your home router and like changing your default Wi-Fi. I got a new router 8 years ago at this point, 9 years, when I moved into my house, like the default password was a scrambled set of numbers. Do I really need to? I went ahead and changed it, right? I changed my Wi-Fi, said all that. But that's about all I did for security. And I haven't had a problem at my house. And so I think it's like, even I think, I love what you said, which is rethinking, the advice, because I think a lot of people are trying to move towards more of a default security. So like, again, my ISP is already doing a lot of that for me instead of giving me a router that has the same password as my neighbor.
That's exactly right. And so, people have asked me, is this all tied back to your work around secure by design software? And there are some consistent themes here. One theme is, let's reassess where we've placed the burden of staying cyber safe. So in the case of your router, we should no longer tolerate a world in which routers come with a password that is literally password 123. There shouldn't be a default password. Why? Because for reasons we don't really need to understand, people are not good at changing those passwords. They're just not. And so rather than give advice to a billion people, can we lean on the technology companies? In some cases, there'll be 2 of them if you're talking about phones, but for things like routers, will be a much larger number. Can we lean on them and say, human nature is what it is. We need to find a way to stay safe. And so can you please figure something out, like ship a different password for every router, or force the person to change the password when they first install it. So there are many different solutions for the different markets and the different ways that people act. But yeah, we need to ask ourselves, where are we putting the burden of staying cyber safe? And so things like these reports of juice jacking or whatever, my plea to the reporters is, please call the technology companies if you think that this is an actual problem, and get them to go on the record and say what they're doing about it. If I go to the airport and plug into the USB charger and my phone gets compromised, that's a defect in the phone. And I want to know what the manufacturer is doing so that it doesn't happen to me again. But we don't complete the circle. We just accept the advice, and that's it. There's no feedback loop to the manufacturers. Now, if they called the manufacturers, they'd probably say, yeah, we've heard of the term, but we're actually unaware of anything ever happening, except in maybe extreme spy cases. And so our comment is, don't worry about it. That's probably what they would say. But we don't actually close the loop. We settle with the advice, which, by the way, nobody listens to.
No. I mean, I think the other thing with this is that we have to realize that I was talking to somebody else about this with, think about fitness advice. Everyone's like, you should be working out, you should be eating healthy. Most people don't listen to that kind of advice. And it's very similar with cybersecurity, right? So to me, it's always picking like that. What is that really, crucial piece of information that we want people to follow, instead of giving them 100? Because if we give them 100 different things, it's going to be very hard for them to follow and do everything. And on top of that, they're dealing with health advice, or dealing with, just life in general. And we're just a very small piece of that.
I think that's exactly right. And we forget the fact that if we give people 100 pieces of advice or 20 pieces of advice, they'll do 0. That's just how it works. And if you've ever sat down with friends and family at the holidays or vacation, and they say, hey, can you help me get a little bit more cyber safe? You'll realize that if you only get them to do one thing, it's a miracle. If you can just get them to have MFA on their primary email account, it's a big victory. I mean, it's a very big victory just to do the one thing. And people, when I've actually done this in person, where I've handed people a sheet of paper and say, hey, can you go do these 10 things? They really struggle. So getting back to the prioritization, back to the threat modeling you mentioned earlier, what is the thing I'm trying to protect? Who might be coming after it? What kind of controls can I reasonably implement? Those are the kinds of things that we need to get back to. And it's funny because we talk about these practices, but actually getting in front of an everyday person and trying to apply them, it's a challenge.
Yeah, and I definitely think cybersecurity folks should try to get in front of people outside of the industry a little bit more, like going and talking to developers, going and talking to, grandparents. I mean, the senior population is probably one of the more targeted people nowadays with one, they got a lot of retirement funds and a lot of scammers, and they're not savvy from a technology standpoint.
That's exactly right. I mean, there's a whole other conversation which is just around elder fraud. It is big business. There are entire call centers set up to exploit people's weaknesses. They don't know to assume that the call allegedly from the bank may not be from the bank, or that the email from a celebrity who needs surgery is not actually that celebrity. And people fall for these scams with great regularity. And so getting them to have things like MFA are part of that solution. It doesn't solve elder fraud, but it gets you partly down that path.
Yeah. Would you say that's like the one piece of advice you'd give people is focus on like the MFA aspect of it?
I think so. I mean, so much of what we see when we see account compromises for large sites, especially things like mail and social media, is that people have not chosen strong passwords. They've not chosen unique passwords. So password reuse is one of the big things. If you talk to the big companies that have like hundreds of millions or billions of users, they'll say password reuse is one of the biggest problems they run into. So if you can't convince them to get a password manager and to change their passwords so that they're all long and unique and randomly generated, start somewhere. Start with MFA. That's been my experience. But I'd also like to hear what you have to say. What have you seen in the wild?
Yeah, I mean, password managers I think are good. They can be a pain in the butt. I mean, they're getting better because they integrate within, a lot of these browsers now and things like that. But they can be, because I've had that case where I had a friend who owned their own small business, and I was working with them, and they gave me a really crappy password for my account that they set up for me. And I said, "Here, let me show you how to use a password manager." I talked to them about a month later. They weren't using the password manager, right? Yeah. And I showed them how easy it was, how it can make their life better. And at the end of the day, too, I can't force them to do anything. So right. I use a password manager. I'm trying to get my kids to use a password manager, but I can also see where people can honestly they can't get by, right? Like you're talking about MFA. I never had an issue with any sort of account because it wasn't like a public account, right? So it was set up, and again, thinking about kind of that threat model, it was like if someone figures this out, like they're really really good at their job. But more than likely, it was kind of the business convenience, right? We were in business together for an activity, and it was more about that. And again, nothing really ever happened with it. So I do agree with password managers. I always like to tell people, try to give them like passphrases, and I say, do it for your main accounts. And I also think you don't need MFA for everything. You got to be concerned about what is your actually most important stuff, your bank account, your email address, focus on that kind of stuff. Because there's a lot of stuff that could have MFA, but is it really that important, right? Your Netflix account, I don't even think they have MFA. They allow 4-character passwords, but it's like if an attacker gets into my Netflix account, the worst they can do is screw up my algorithm for what I'm watching.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And back to the earlier conversation, people will have a certain appetite for improving the security posture of their digital lives. It's not what we want them to do in terms of spending the amount of time. My experience has been that no matter what people actually tell you, they're not spending hours per month to improve their security posture. They're not even spending hours per year. My experience is that no matter what people actually tell you, they will only spend minutes per year to improve the security of their digital ecosystem. So if you only had, to your earlier question, one thing you could recommend, what would it be? If you could sit down at Thanksgiving or vacation, just do one thing with them, what would it be? That's an important question because that may be all you can do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think freezing your credit is another one. As you were talking, I was thinking about that because, and I got on board with this. Brian Krebs is a great article. I'm sure you've read Brian Krebs before. He's got a lot of that good stuff, and I also say a lot of that good stuff. Or he recently had it about the those boxes that get you like free TV or free subscriptions to stuff that ended up being like a proxy for a big botnet. Now, again, most people aren't going to be concerned, but if you're wondering why your internet's on the house, is because, bad guys are using that box for whatever. But, freezing credit has always been something I've done because my daughter's information got compromised in the 2012 South Carolina Department of Revenue breach, which compromised every sort of tax-paying person in the state of South Carolina in 2012. So it's like, for her, it's like we got to freeze her credit. I froze my credit because I was part of the OPM breach on top of being part. So I had both the state and federal government lose all my information very early on in my career. And so it's like, freezing my credit, I haven't had an issue where someone's trying to pretend to be me because my information's out there.
Right.
But that's usually pretty easy to go do. I mean, the companies have gotten better about, and we're kind of forced to do it from a free standpoint. I remember when I actually had to pay for one of them at one point, but because they then don't make money because they can't sell your information at these tax or the what is it, Experian and all those.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And you're highlighting an important thing, which is that the things that we have identified on hacklore.org are really just the very foundation, the very low foundation, and that in order to improve your privacy and security, you're going to have to continue to do more. And so worrying about the elder fraud, worrying about your data and the data brokers, worrying about the credit agencies. Yeah, these are all additional things for privacy and security on top of the basics. And it can be very daunting. That's why figuring out how to start somewhere is really been the key in my experience. So that's what we really just focused on. I know a number of people said, oh, you should do much more on privacy. And I think we're just going to kind of stick to the basics around cybersecurity. And then there are plenty of other resources that we link to. So it's not just the stuff at hacklore.org. It's not the Bible. You can go to the Consumer Reports Security Planner. The EFF has lots of great resources, lots of other things to build on top of. But these are really just the foundational elements. One other thing you mentioned with regard to password managers that I found somewhat persuasive to some people some of the time, which is that phishing is the sort of thing where if you think that you're not going to be a victim, then you're the perfect mark. And so you need to be very skeptical about your own ability to detect some scam that's happening. I mean, scams work because the people that's their job. Their job is to trick you, and your job is not to not get tricked. And so at some point, they will win, they will phish you, they will phish me. So the question is, do you have enough other controls in place that will help you resist the full compromise? And a password manager does that. And I was actually trading emails. Somebody wrote into hacklore.org and they asked me this question. I thought it was very good, which is, but I like to have a password manager where I copy and paste the values into the website. And I had to explain, well, you're now in the habit of copying and pasting into a website, but you as a human are not going to be able to recognize these URLs these days. You can't tell if that's the actual website or not. And so a password manager, it's just a dumb computer, and that's an advantage. So what it'll do is it'll look at the URL, and then it will look in its database. And if it doesn't have a matching entry, it says, I cannot fill this in for you. So there's actually a real advantage to telling or configuring the password manager to enter in your names and passwords when you tell it to, rather than copying and pasting. And so what happens is if you're tricked into going to an imposter website, the attack just stops and you just look confused and you're like, why does this password manager not work? Oh, wait a minute, what is the site that I'm on? Maybe the password manager just saved me. So that's one of these little side benefits that we don't really hear many people talk about as much as they could. Even in the case where you had not great passwords, it's still going to stop that particular class of attack.
Yeah, no, sure, for sure. So you mentioned kind of getting some of the basics. How do you know? Because I feel like you could definitely get into some scope creep, right? Like how do you know when to actually stop and like when to? Because I feel like there's kind of tiers here, right? There's kind of this for everybody kind of stuff. There's an opportunity for people that want to know more, because there are some people I know that aren't in cybersecurity that really love YubiKeys or kind of tech type of people, so they will go the extra mile there. But kind of where do you set, I guess, or how do you determine where to actually stop with some of this versus just keeping it going, right?
I guess you could just keep going forever. I mean, there's some things that really start to eliminate entire classes of attacks. So you mentioned passkeys. So now that's the new term. So passkeys come in two forms. They can either be synced, which means they can go into your password manager, or they can be on your physical keychain. So you mentioned Yubico and other companies, they make these devices. So those are part of a thing called FIDO authentication. And those really, it's strange. We don't have a lot of places in this industry where we just say like, oh, we just solved that problem. So you have things like TLS where it's like, nobody's eavesdropping in on my TLS connections. They have to go do something else. And that's the point of security. We're trying to force the attacker to do something different, to change their tactics, to invest in something else. And so things like FIDO authentication means that whenever I do whatever the scammer says to do, I still cannot give them control of my account. That's the weird thing about it, is I'm duped into doing what they say. I go into the website and I type my name and password because I'm not using a password manager. But then the fact that I'm using FIDO authentication or passkeys, it means that I can't actually get in. So that raises the bar to the point where then they have to do something else. So maybe they've got to figure out how to send me malware, or, so changing the cost structure for the attacker is really all we can do in security. But those technologies raise the cost and force the bad guys to retool. So I think, if you were to get to a point where all of your major accounts, you had passkeys, maybe they were synced passkeys, you put them in your password manager, or for the ones that are really high value, like maybe your mail account, if you were to use that, I don't want to say you're ever done, but maybe your time is better spent doing something else to harden your environment at that point, because authentication is not how they're going to get you. They're going to get you some other way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I feel like there's also, going back to kind of the tiers, right? Like crypto people that have crypto, they're going to have a different level because there's a lot of targeting going after those accounts.
That's really a very good point. So it's not a spy story, but having even a little bit of money in a crypto wallet can be a magnet for the scammers. And they will do and try everything. They will send text messages that look like they're coming from a reputable source. They will send emails that look like they come from reputable sources. They will find you on Discord. I mean, that is a tough nut to crack. I don't have a lot of money in crypto, so I don't personally experience that. But that is an area where you need to continue to up your game.
Yeah. So what do you consider the most dangerous piece of Hacklore right now?
I don't know that there's one that's dangerous. In other words, if you avoid cafe Wi-Fi, have you done anything wrong? No, I think you may have missed out on an opportunity just to do something fairly straightforward. But you could use your phone, and people have fairly permissive phone bandwidth plans these days. So maybe it's not the end of the world. I think what happens, though, is that these pieces of advice, they're outdated and they don't actually help improve your security. And what that does is it robs you of the time and the energy that you have to do the things that really do matter. So I think that's the problem. It's not that you're going to get hacked if you follow these pieces of advice, because they're often don't do the thing. So back to the earlier conversation, if you go around spending your time figuring out how to avoid the cafe Wi-Fi or the hotel Wi-Fi. I mean, honestly, nobody avoids these things. That's the other thing, is everybody just not doing what the advice says, and they seem to be fine. So you're just wasting their time, and you're convincing them that maybe we're not very serious people. Maybe we're not very good at our jobs. And so I think what you do is you really reduce their capacity to do the things that really do matter, which kind of goes back to the fact that different studies show that maybe only a third of people use password managers, and a lot of people reuse their passwords. And so we have diverted them from the basics, and there's sort of a long burn problem there. And that's the real problem. It's not an immediate harm. It just makes them safe overall over the long term.
Yeah, I feel like speaking of MFA, right? At one point, things seem to progress with improvements in MFA. One, we get the MFA gets stronger, but then attackers find ways around it, right? A lot of people said don't use SMS anymore, but it's like that's still kind of better than nothing, right? And then now I keep seeing the advice: use phishing resistant MFA. I'm telling you, there's some people, go give your grandparents a YubiKey and see how well they do with that. Yeah. So there's a bit of a learning curve there. So I feel like just like some of the MFA, we kind of have to keep up to date, but also at the end of the day, to your point, it's kind of like as long as they have something in place, it's better than nothing.
And Microsoft did a study. So they published a study that showed across their services, and of course they have billions of users, they showed that any form of MFA is better than no MFA, that even SMS-based, which is a phishable form of MFA, even that degrades most of the attacks that they see in the wild. And I can send you the link to the paper, but it really does show you that, sure, I would rather that you use passkeys for your primary email account. But if I can get you onto SMS, you're now not in the main crosshairs of the most common attacks against your account. And that's really, again, all we're really trying to do. There's no perfect security. So what can I convince you to do that's going to raise the cost to the attackers just enough that you're going to avoid most of the attacks most of the time? That's really all we're doing. And we kind of forget that sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I've learned in security awareness, especially is I'm studying a lot more marketing and kind of using some of those techniques to get people to actually pay attention to this kind of stuff. Because, and again, marketing too, it's like if you add a barrier to entry, you're going to lose a certain set of people because they don't want to go over that barrier. Some people will go over it, but so that's where, again, going back to trying to make it by default and really trying to make it as easy as possible. And again, I think we've seen some of the improvements. Everyone's got a phone. So at this point, just about everybody's got a phone. And so a phone number, and they can get a code and put that into a website.
That's right. Exactly right.
What would you consider success criteria for, hacklore.org?
Yeah, so I think a few things. One is so the first point is we now have a place where people can go that seeks to debunk some of these common myths. So we didn't have that before. We didn't have a place that was it's non-commercial. It's built out by a series of security experts. Having a place to go to is one milestone, but I think we need to figure out how to find the sources of the Hacklore that happens in the news on a regular basis, and find the people and organizations that are really well positioned to echo the message. And so there are lots of nonprofits, there are lots of government agencies that either directly or indirectly promote advice that is obsolete. And so finding a way to build critical mass there is really one of the things I'm working on. So I've been talking to a number of these different organizations, sort of side channels, to say, hey, is there something we can do to partner here? Is there some way that you can use your webinars, your podcasts, your whatever it is to get the same message out so that we have multiple organizations saying the same thing? So we'll see. It's as you well know, getting organizations to change their guidance. It's a journey. It's a journey, but I've been pretty lucky so far, and so hopefully we'll, over the course of the next 6 months, see at least a few starting to embrace this new model. And if we can keep going, then a year from now, maybe 2 years from now, maybe we can just retire the website.
Yeah. So how do we get to that point? Because I run into this in my past jobs, my current jobs, is this kind of better safe than sorry kind of mentality. Well, I'd rather we do, we'd provide this than not provide it. Like, how do you combat some of that? Especially, if you buy into some of this, I'm sure there's some people, listening that go, oh, I don't, whatever, I'm still going to give the advice or whatever. But there are people that want to do, like, provide the most valuable advice. Let's say it that way, is most valuable advice. Like, how do you deal with that? Well, better safe than sorry argument,
It's everywhere, isn't it?
Yes.
And so I think that there's a germ of truth in that. Yes, we should think about all of the things that you can do to improve your security posture, and we should weigh those against the ability for people to implement those. We should weigh those against the way the crimes really happen. And we should just figure out how to let the most important ones rise to the top, and then we should have a cut line. And so that goes back to the conversation about people's appetite for doing things. And when we continue to give people advice that doesn't measurably reduce actual crimes, wasting their times and their attention, and we're limiting their ability to do things that really do matter. So there really is an active harm in diverting people from the things that matter most. That doesn't sound right to somebody who says, but there was this one time when this bad thing happened, so I want to warn other friends that they should look out for this. But we don't warn people in most states, in most forms of weather, to worry about lightning strikes. I mean, if it's raining and you're in a golf course and you're very high up, maybe you should get out of there. But other than that, I don't warn my neighbors here in San Francisco, hey, listen, let me tell you about some precautions about lightning strikes. Well, lightning does strike a bunch of people every year, but it's not going to strike you. And so that's what we need to figure out, is how to figure out how to do the things that are going to give people the biggest bang for the buck. And it's frustrating because we do this all day long. We do security. And there was the one dude who did get compromised because of the thing. And that's just not something that you can apply to everybody. And so we should go fix that vulnerability. We should yell at the software companies, yell at the tech companies. We should totally go do all that. Make it secure by design. Totally. But the advice that we give people has to be given through a different lens, run through a different filter, so that we can actually help them. That's the trick. And when I sat down with people one-on-one, and if you've sat down with your friends or relatives at Christmas and Thanksgiving, let me tell you, they can really just do a few things. So that for me is the biggest bang for the buck. Just don't give people things that are going to allow them to become fatalistic and say, oh, no matter what I do, bad guys are going to get me. Because that's just not true.
Yeah. No, I agree. Is there anything you'd like to mention that we haven't already covered?
I think that's really it. I think just getting people to think, to recompute, to hit that F9 recalc is just a healthy thing. And hopefully people check out hacklore.org and be able to spread the good word.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Anything else you want to plug outside of hacklore.org?
I think that's it. I'll be at RSA, so come see my talk if you're attending, and come say hi.
Cool. Well, Bob, thank you for joining me to talk about Hacklore.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.